Welcome! I'm Kelly Wayment for Silhouette, and I'm here to show you everything you need to know about vinyl. First, let's talk about what vinyl is. Vinyl is a thin, self-adhesive, plastic-like material that you can cut with your silhouette and then apply it to a variety of surfaces. Silhouette vinyl comes generally in 9 or 12-inch rolls, and there's many different types of vinyl. It comes in matte vinyl, glossy vinyl. Matte vinyl has a more temporary hold, so it's easy to remove from the surfaces you apply it to. Glossy vinyl is what you would use outdoors, like on a mailbox or a door, because it has a stronger adhesive and a more permanent hold. But you can also use glossy vinyl indoors for projects where you want that glossy, slick surface, or if you need the stronger hold. There's also other types of vinyl. You've got reflective, metallic, whiteboard, chalkboard, glow-in-the-dark, carbon fiber. You've even got printable vinyl sheets. Vinyl's really easy to use, and there are a few basic tools you'll use when using vinyl. So of course you'll use a Silhouette machine, and the Cameo, Portrait, and Curio can all cut vinyl. You'll also use a hook tool for weeding away extra parts that you don't need once you've cut it. You'll use transfer tape for picking up the vinyl after you've weeded it, so you can keep everything in place and don't have to place things by hand. You'll use a scraper tool to apply the vinyl to your surface and get a really good grip. And then of course you'll use a Silhouette blade, whether that's the automatic blade, the ratchet blade, or any type of blade. Those will work for the vinyl. You can cut vinyl directly from the roll, or you can use a cutting mat. If you use a cutting mat, that's nice if you have small pieces of vinyl or something that fits completely on the mat. If you want to cut from the roll, you can feed it directly into your machine, or you might want to use the roll feeder to keep things stable. Now let's talk about what designs are appropriate to cut with vinyl. Vinyl is great for cutting intricate shapes because it's not fibrous like paper and it has an adhesive backing. So you can cut, like this metallic vinyl, phrases and things with a lot of tiny pieces, because you'll use your transfer tape to apply all those pieces at once and you don't have to worry about losing anything. You can also cut layers of vinyl, so you can have multiple colors of vinyl all on the same design. Vinyl's also great for cutting large designs because you can use the full length of a roll, and if you're using a Cameo, you can cut the full 12-inch width, and then you can cut the full length of the roll as well. You probably won't need to cut that large of a project most of the time, but you can. I mentioned weeding with the hook tool earlier, so let me explain to you what weeding is. Weeding is the process of just taking away the materials you don't need. So on this design, I'm just taking away the background and the letter centers. So on a small design like this, I was able to pull the background away all at once. But if you have a large design, it's helpful to have weed lines, which divides up your design into sections so you can pull it away small pieces at a time. And that way, big parts don't pull back onto the design and stick to it. Let me show you how to create weed lines in the software. If you don't have the business edition of Silhouette Studio, you'll need to create your own weed lines. So what I'll do is I'll just use my drawing tools and my line tools, and I'll just draw a rectangle around this top word. We want to make sure that none of these weed lines touch the design so it doesn't slice into it. Now this bottom section of this design, it's hard to catch all of the design into a rectangle, and so I'll use my line drawing tool instead. I'll drag a polygon line tool and double click to end it. That way I'm not touching the design, but I've separated this design into sections. Now, If you have the Business Edition, let me show you how it will create weed lines for you. The weed settings are here with 2 letters within a dashed line, and I'm just going to select recursive. You've got choices that let you choose horizontal or vertical, and recursive will actually give you the most weed lines. These weed lines are looking for gaps between your design to create these weed lines for you. And remember, if you don't have Business Edition, you can create your own weed lines. Now we're ready to cut this design. So we're going to go into the Send panel, and you'll see there's a cut preview. So anything that's in a bold red line is going to cut. So it's going to cut both my design and these weed lines. We want to choose glossy vinyl for the material. We want it set to cut, and I'm going to use the auto blade because I have a Cameo 3, but you could choose the ratchet blade if that's what you're using. Now that we have our settings in the software, we want to do a test cut and make sure that those settings work for our vinyl. So let me show you how to load your vinyl into the machine. The Cameo has adjustable rollers, so if you want to do a 12-inch roll of vinyl, we're going to need to adjust the rollers. So what we'll do is we will pull down the release lever. We're going to move this roller into the unlocked position, slide it over to the next groove so we can do a 12-inch roll and put it back into the locked position. Then pull the release lever up so the rollers don't move. Okay, you could feed your roll directly into your machine at this point, but it's nice if you have a roll feeder because it'll keep the roll from moving while you're working. So, to set up the roll feeder, it has holes. You just lift up the Cameo and it will settle into these feet. So the roll itself just rests on these rollers here in the roll feeder, and you can adjust this bar. And I will usually curl up the front end of my vinyl so it doesn't snag in any grooves. Now, one really important part when working with vinyl straight from the roll is that you need your front edge completely straight. You want it to feed into the rollers evenly, and you want those to grip at the same time. If it rolls off the tracks later, if it comes out of the rollers, your vinyl could go in a lot of different directions while it's cutting, and you don't want that. So we'll place the vinyl on the roll feeder's wheels, and then your vinyl goes up and over and through this white bar on the front. Now we'll line up the edge of the vinyl with the arrows and make sure it's gripping those rollers evenly, and press load. And once it's loaded, you just want to make sure that your vinyl goes straight across. So now we'll do a test cut back in the software. Just click the test button . We'll unload that and look at our test cut. We want it to cut all the way through the vinyl cleanly, but not cut through the backing. And that works, and so we are ready to cut our design as soon as we've loaded this again. Just push the blue send button at the bottom. Okay, once your vinyl is done cutting, you can either unload it and cut it with a paper trimmer, or you can use the cross cutter either in the back of the Cameo or on the roll feeder itself. So I'm going to use the arrows in the software to make sure that my design is clear of the crosscutter groove. And to use the crosscutter, we're just going to hold the vinyl in place, put the crosscutter in the groove, and just do a quick slice across. And now we can unload the vinyl. Now that we've cut this with our weed lines, we're ready to weed it. This is where your hook tool comes in handy. Just like weeding in a garden, your goal is to pull out the things that you don't need. So we're going to take out all of the letter centers and all of the background area, leaving just the design in place. Okay, now this design is just like a big giant sticker. It's got sticky on the back, and we can just use transfer tape to pick it up and apply it to our surface. Now I'm going to set this large one aside for just a minute and show you how to apply a vinyl design with this small one we weeded earlier with transfer tape. So make sure that your surface is clean and dry. And you're just going to take transfer tape and make sure it is at least as large, slightly larger than your design. Press it down on your design. Use your scraper tool to give that some pressure. And then you can either peel it up like this and pull it up with the transfer tape, or flip it over so your vinyl stays against the transfer paper. And if it still gives you trouble, you can use your scraper tool and put pressure against it as you're peeling it away. Now we'll pick it up, use these grid lines to line it up vertically, and I like to press it down in the center first, and then push away from the center so you don't get any bubbles. Use your scraper tool again to make sure that is stuck nice and tight to your design, to your surface. Then peel your transfer tape away. And there you go. There's your nice label. Now, if you have a large design, that works great for a small design. If you have a large design, I like to use the hinge method. So basically we're going to create a hinge line with our transfer tape where we will have a bend in the design so we can apply it. I'll show you how that works. So with the transfer tape, I'm just going to fold back or cut back about 1 inch off the top of the backing. And I've cut this transfer tape to be just about the same size as my design, my backing on my design. Okay, so I'm going to fold back about the top inch. And I'm going to use this to line it up against the backing of my design, my vinyl cutout, and I'll press that down, and here's my hinge. Now I'm just going to pull the backing out from underneath my transfer tape and smooth it against my design as I go. I want to try and avoid any bubbles. You can use your hands or your scraper tool. Okay, and I'll use my scraper tool again to rub that on so it sticks nicely to the transfer tape. Now I'm going to create a hinge again, folding back about the top inch of the backing. And now I can use this before it's completely uncovered. I can center my design on my surface. Now if I put it down right now, I can look at it and eyeball it and see if I think that looks straight. I think it does. So here we go again. We're going to peel the backing away, making sure that the vinyl design sticks onto the surface. I'm going to go nice and slow. Make sure that all of that design transfers and that we don't get any bubbles. And if you see little mistakes along the way, it's okay to fix them. It's just like a big sticker. Okay, I'll smooth it down with the scraper tool. We can peel that transfer tape away. I've got one little wrinkle there, but I can smooth that out. And there we go. Now we're going to talk about multicolored layered designs. Some designs look good with multiple colors of vinyl, and I'm going to show you how to do that by using registration marks. And we're going to do that in the software. Okay, we're going to create our own registration marks, and I'm just going to do that by doing a small X. I'll just create my own letter X and put it up above the design, and I'll make a copy of that. Just duplicate it and drag it over. And I'll align those. Okay, now let's create some quick weed lines. Just going to use my line drawing tools to divide these up. And I'm actually going to adjust the straight line by adding an edit point, double clicking on that existing line, and then I can click and create better points. Okay, so nothing's touching. A couple more weed lines. And double click to end on that one. I also want to make sure that I've got my page setup panel set up the same as the material I'll be working with. And so I've got my page set up to 3 inches wide by 4 inches tall, and I've gone back to using a Cameo 12 by 12 inch mat, whereas before I was using no mat. Okay, so we're ready to go to the send panel. And this time I'm going to choose action by fill. So I'll just click on the fill tab, and this is going to show every color that I have on my design. So it's got a gold and this light gray, and then it's got a no color, and this no color is my registration marks and my weed lines. So I want this no color to cut every time I send one of these colors to my machine. So I've got that box checked, and then I am going to cut the white color. I'm going to cut from white vinyl, and so I've got my box checked for that. I don't have my gold checked because I don't want to cut that one yet. So this is going to cut the white and the weed lines and the registration marks. Now make sure that all of your materials show the same thing. I want glossy vinyl, and I want the action to be cut on all of these, and I want my auto blade for my tool on these. So now we're going to get this loaded and cut. All right, so this time we're going to cut our vinyl on a mat because it's a small piece and it is too small to be gripped by the rollers. So I've already adjusted my roller blade back out to the furthest position so it can grip my mat. And with a mat, you're just going to take off the protective liner and save that because you want to put that liner back on your mat while you're storing it and not using it. And I've got my vinyl that matches my page size in my software that's just 3 inches by 4 inches. So I'm just going to press it against the sticky mat, and we can load it into the machine and cut it. This time, instead of the vinyl lining up on the edge, I'm lining up the mat against the edge on the guideline. So press load, and I will just press send in the software. Okay, we'll unload this one. And just pull that off the mat. And so that has cut all of my white design plus my weed lines and my registration marks. And now to cut the next color, I'll load it on my mat. Put the mat in the machine. Back in the software, I want to leave the clear color checked. I'm going to uncheck the white, and I'll put a check in the box for the gold. And now when I press send, it's just going to cut the gold with the weed lines and registration marks. Okay, and you can do that with as many colors as you need to. You're just going to check the box for the color that you want to cut at that pass. So I'll set aside my mat and we'll get these weeded. All right, and I've got the gold weeded already. So now we're going to use these registration marks we created to line these up perfectly. So we'll get our transfer tape that I've also cut down to size. And I'm going to start with the top layer first. So if any of your design overlaps, you want whatever needs to be on top of the other layers to be your first layer to go against the transfer tape. All right, and I'm actually going to place the design back against the backing, so only my registration marks are there. So if I get my registration marks exactly where they belong, then the rest of the design will be in place. Okay, So now that's all on one piece of transfer tape. You would just do that with all of your layers if you have more than 2. Take off our backing, and we don't need the registration marks anymore because those don't need to be put on our surface. And we will put this on a phone case. Remember, slick surfaces work the best, but if you're careful, you can apply them to surfaces that are slightly less smooth. There we go. So now we're going to talk about applying vinyl to a curved surface. Now in general, it's best to avoid applying vinyl to a curved surface, but you can do it if you know a few tricks, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So a lot of it depends on the design you choose. For this snowflake, if I want to apply it to a Christmas ornament, let me show you what would happen if you just applied a design that was connected all the way around. Just like this piece of paper has crumples in it, you would get the same thing on your vinyl design if it was connected around the outside. So if you want to apply it to a curve, you're going to choose a design that's only connected in the center and then has kind of spokes that move out from the center, so there's nothing connected on the outside. I'm going to put this on a soft surface to hold it so it doesn't roll away. And I'm going to put my transfer tape on this design. And since the transfer tape is still flat and connected all the way around, I'm going to slice in between these areas of the design. This is going to let the transfer tape curve around the surface as we apply it. Okay, so we'll remove the backing. And as I apply this to my ornament, I'm just going to press down in the center, and then I will smooth away from that center point. Now when we take the transfer tape off, the design stays in place. And it has been able to wrap around the curved surface. That's how you need to choose your design for a curved surface, really curved. But if you have a mug that's only slightly curved, you can usually find a spot either with a really small design or just use the same concept. We're going to use our transfer tape and put it on our cutout. And just to be careful of those curves, we'll put some slices in there. Just be careful not to cut your design. And I'm going to choose a spot on my mug that's as flat as I can get it. And again, I'm going to apply it in the center first. Use my grid lines to line it up vertically, and I'll press down in the center and then work my way outward. And that design, since it's on a slight curve, it is going to curve just a little bit, but you can avoid a lot of trouble if you put it on the most flat area you can. Now, if you do have a design that is larger, that would go the full length of a mug, you're better off choosing a mug that's got completely straight and flat sides, because it'll curve this way without any trouble. It doesn't have any roundness to it. So now, what if you have a tapered surface, like a drink container or a cup like this? This takes a special kind of design. So let me show you what happens if I just cut a straight word, it goes straight across, and I apply it to this tapered surface. If I apply it in the center and then smooth it out away from the center, it's going to take on the curve of the cup. So that's why you would avoid using a tapered surface. But if you have business edition, there's something called the Conical warp tool that will take out the curve and compensate for the curve of your cup. So let's go into the software and look at that. Okay, so I have this word and I want to put it on a small little tapered pot, a little terracotta pot. And so what I need to do is use the Conical warp tool. So I'm going to go, because I have business edition, and find the warp panel and go to the second tab that says Conical warp. I'm going to select my design and choose Conical warp selected shapes. And now all I need to do is input the dimensions of the pot. So I've already got it written in a sticky note off to the side. My pot is 2.75 inches at the top, 1.625 at the base. It's 2.25 inches tall, and I want to center it vertically at 1 inch. So now the design itself has a curve to it, but when we go to the send panel and we cut it out, that curve is going to cut the way we need it to on the vinyl, and then when we apply it, it's going to straighten out against the curve. All right, so I have cut out this vinyl that was on the curve with my Conical warp tool, and I am just going to use a really small piece of transfer tape to pick that up. And I can apply it to this pot. Just use my vertical line on the grid to line that up vertically, and again I'm just going to start at the center and press my way outward. And you would see this a lot more on a longer word, but we're just going to put that on there, and the transfer tape still curves around, but the vinyl design itself now has a straight across top. It's compensated for that curve. Now I've got my little pots with my vinyl design. There's a couple more things I want to mention when you're working with curved surfaces or mugs. A mug or a curved surface, that's when you're going to have a lot more chance of getting bubbles in your design. I've mentioned starting from the center and pressing outwards. If you just lay it on flat, that's when you're going to have more chance of getting bubbles. So if you do ever get bubbles, you can just take a pin and poke little tiny holes and press them out to get rid of your bubbles. Now another thing with mugs, since they're going to be used and washed, you want to use permanent vinyl, the glossy vinyl, and that will stay a lot longer. You should probably hand wash them also and let your vinyl sit at least 24 hours before you try and wash it, and that'll kind of cure it to the mug and it'll last a lot longer. So far, we've applied vinyl to a variety of surfaces, but you can also use vinyl as a stencil. So the vinyl becomes a mask so you can paint and fill in the areas and block off the parts that you don't want painted. I have here a set of painted coasters, and I've just painted them white, and I want to add a vinyl design in paint onto these. So first I'm going to show you how to do that in the software. Okay, so I have the vinyl design that I want to cut out to become, the colored part is the part that I want to be colored and painted on my coaster. And so I've used my rectangle drawing tool and just created a square around my design. You need to make sure that when you're creating a stencil that you've got a border that will cut out, that will leave a gap where the vinyl will mask off any extra paint. So for this design, I only need my square to be 4 inches by 4 inches because that will cover my entire coaster. If I had a larger design, I might give it 1 inch on every side for this border. And so now that I've got my vinyl design and my square around it, I'm ready to cut this and use it as a stencil. Okay, so I have cut out my vinyl and I've weeded this, so I've actually removed the design that I want to use as paint. So I've left the border outside of it, and I have left all of these inside pieces of vinyl in place. And so now I'm going to take my transfer tape and we'll get this put onto the coaster. Now you can use any color of vinyl. You can use stencil vinyl that's obviously made for stencils. I've just chosen a colored vinyl so you can see what I'm doing better. Make sure you don't pick up any pieces, that they all stay there on the transfer tape. And we will put this on the coaster. We'll remove just the transfer tape, leaving the vinyl there. Okay, now once the transfer tape is off, you want to smooth it really well with your fingers. You don't want the paint to go underneath any of these pieces of vinyl. All of those edges need to be pressed tight against the coaster. Okay, so now we're going to apply paint to this surface. If you're worried about it leaking underneath, you can use a first coat of the same color as the background paint that you've used. But I'm just going to go straight to my color. You can use a foam brush or a stipple brush, and you're just going to put some paint onto your brush and just go with up and down motions. And the paint will only go where it's exposed from the vinyl, having an opening, and the rest of the vinyl acts as a mask to block the rest off. And this is just acrylic paint that I'm using. I've painted it with acrylic paint for my base layer, the white, and then this is just blue acrylic paint to go on top. Now you want to remove the vinyl when the paint is mostly dry, and since we've stippled this, it's actually a pretty thin layer, and we can remove the vinyl immediately. So you can see that the paint only stays where those openings were, and the vinyl was a good mask for the rest. And you can use your hook tool or your fingernails or a craft knife to peel away those intersections. Now we've got a set of painted coasters, and if you have any flaws, you can just take a paintbrush and touch those up. And then you might also want to apply a protective sealer over the top of that. Sometimes you have a really large design that you want to cut with vinyl, but it's larger than you can cut with a 12-inch roll. And so you have to cut it in parts and put it together. We call this tiling. So let me show you in the software how to do this. So I have a design and I want to resize it. So I'll go to my scale, make sure that it's locked, and I'm going to make this 15 inches wide. So as you can see, I've got this set up with my page setup panel. I've got this set to 12 inches wide, which is how wide my vinyl is, and at 20 inches tall. It's out of those borders, so we need to split this into two parts. First, I'm going to make this a compound path. So I'll go to my Modify panel, and I'm going to choose Make Compound Path. That ensures that this design is as simple as it can be and is all one piece, all one layer. So if you have the basic edition of Silhouette Studio, you can just use your knife tool to cut into this design. Actually, let me back up. First, we're going to create some weed lines. We're going to do this a little differently this time. I'm going to draw some lines edge to edge, actually for the width of the full design. And this design is such that it's just going to be too close together to get any vertical and horizontal gaps in there to use my automatic weed lines. So I'm going to draw lines all the way across. And to make a copy of an existing shape, I'm going to hold my Alt key and click and drag that line down. So I'll make a few quick copies of these lines. And I'll show you a trick so you're not cutting into these shapes. I'm going to select just the lines, and again I'm going to make these a compound path so they are all one layer, and I am going to send them to the back so they are behind my text. In fact, I'm going to fill that with color. Okay, so I have lines and I have my design, and I want only the lines to exist that aren't behind the rest of the design. So I'm going to select the whole thing, the lines and the design together. And if I go to Subtract All in my Modify panel, that tells me it's going to subtract the areas of shapes that are obscured by other shapes. So the design that's on top is just going to delete the lines that are hidden behind them. So when I choose Subtract All, that means that only the lines that are exposed that you can see are going to show. And while I have this selected, I'm going to group it. Let's go to the Send panel really quick and just make sure as we zoom in that those lines are not showing underneath. And it looks like we're good. If you just have basic edition, we're going to use the knife tool to cut this design so we can cut only part of it at a time. So we want to make sure we've got a straight line and we want to treat it as solid. So we are just going to pick a spot and drag our knife straight down. And that is going to slice our design in half. And we'll select up until that dividing point. Make sure we have everything together for this half of the design, and we'll group it. If we move that aside, you can see that we've just split our design into two parts. So I'll group each one. And when you have a design, over here in the holding area, that part's not going to cut. All right, now let me actually show you how to do this in Business Edition. If you're not using the knife tool, you've got an automatic tiling feature. So I'm going to go back to the point before I split these in half. Okay, so that's all one shape again. So if you have Business Edition, we're going to go to the Media Layout Setup panel. So we've got an icon down here with a bunch of triangles, and we want to click the box for Show Media Layout Split Screen. On this first tab, we want to make sure that our media matches what we're actually going to be cutting. So we want a 12-inch width, we want our height to be 20, and we want our cutting mat to be none. Okay, so that's going to make our design, as soon as we tile it, on the right size for our media. Click on the Tiling tab and check the box for Tiling Active. And now this is going to split our design up for us so we don't have to use the knife tool. Now if you want to adjust where your tiling splits are, that's easy to do. You just drag these arrows around. You can actually turn on and turn off what will cut by clicking on these boxes. So I want them both to be highlighted blue. That means it's going to cut these in two separate segments. And we are ready to go to the Send panel. We'll make sure that we have our material set correctly, which is vinyl glossy. Our action is cut, and I'm going to use the auto blade. So after I load my material, this is going to cut the first section when I press send, and then it's going to wait for me to unload the material and reload a new piece in, and it'll give me the option to resume when I'm ready to cut the second piece. So let's go ahead and get our vinyl loaded, and we will send this to the machine. All right, so we have cut both sections of this large piece of vinyl in two separate passes. Now it's weeded and we're ready to apply the transfer tape. I'm actually going to attach this to my table so it doesn't roll away. And I have cut my first section of transfer tape the same size, 12 inches wide, and a little bit longer than the design. And so I'm going to use that same hinge method to apply my transfer tape. I'll fold back just the top. I cover my full design. So once you've applied your transfer tape to both parts of your design, you have the choice of applying it all as one piece of transfer tape with overlapping sections, or you can apply it in two separate sections to the wall. It's whatever you find easiest. Now we're ready to apply this to the wall. We've got our design all cut out and the transfer tape applied to it. And I've left a little extra at the top, so I can use that to temporarily put it here on my wall. So I can hold it there for a minute and just look at it and see if it's level before I commit the whole thing. So if I like how that looks, and I think I'll add a little painter's tape to give me an extra hinge at the top. So now I'm just going to peel the backing away, leaving the vinyl on the wall. I'll peel the transfer tape up off this first section before applying the second section that we cut. On the second section, I've cut a little bit of the backing away so I can line it up with this side. And your hinge doesn't always have to be at the top. You could move it from the side also. And there's your large design. Thanks for joining me in everything you need to know about vinyl. We hope you've learned something new. By now you should know the different types of vinyl, the tools you need, weeding and creating weed lines, how to cut vinyl, and then how to apply it with transfer tape, how to use vinyl as a stencil, and how to do tiling. Make sure you check out our other resources like our YouTube videos and our blog, and reach out to our support team if you need it at support@silhouetteamerica.com. Good luck on your next vinyl project.